Hello YouTube, it's FACEvlog! And today we're gonna look at whether we think Stephen Avery is innocent or guilty. We're gonna look at information that suggests he is innocent, information that suggests he is guilty. And then at the end of it we'll have a quick discussion as to what we think. Okay YouTube, so let's now have a look at the case for Stephen Avery and hopefully be able to conclude whether he is guilty or innocent. This is in response to the documentary The Making of a Murderer from Netflix, which has caused quite a bit of a stir in the last couple of months. I'm now recording this in February 2016, so I believe it was released in December 2015, so it's definitely worth a view before going through this. Okay, to begin with, let's look at the information that suggests he may be guilty. There he is in a kind of police mugshot, which again would suggest guilt. So that's why I chose it for this slide. So let's have a look. To begin with, first of all, Teresa's car was found on his property. Now, whether it was planted there or not is a different matter from a police perspective. The fact that the car was found on his property suggests that he would be a prime suspect. Also, the car was there was an attempt made to conceal the car with bushes and wood and other things. So that suggests he is guilty. He was also the last to see her alive. She had a few appointments that day, and his was the last. He was interviewed almost immediately, I think, after she was reported missing by one of the media channels, and I believe that is in Making of a Murderer. So he was the last to see her alive, again suggesting another point of inquiry or questioning from the police force. He also called Teresa 3 times that day, and the first 2 times it was on private number or withholding his number, so one must question why he actually had to withhold his number. Was there a reason for him not to show Teresa that it was him calling? Suggests some form of foul play. The 3rd time apparently would have been after the so-called murder would have been committed, so she wouldn't have probably picked up anyway if he knew that she was dead. So obviously that suggests some form of foul play and some form of guilt. He has had previous interest in Teresa. She worked for the Auto Trader magazine, taking pictures for clients to advertise their vehicles in the Auto Trader. He always asked for her to arrive when he was dealing with that company, and there was an instance of him coming to the door in a towel, which definitely was identified by Teresa to be very awkward and out of place. So she wasn't very happy with meeting him. Maybe that's why he withheld his number beforehand, who knows. But there was definitely a previous interest and an interest with Teresa. He also lied to Auto Trader about who the appointment was for. He said it was for his sister. Now the defense suggested afterwards that actually this was because he was selling the car on behalf of his sister. But one may suggest that if he's dealt with Miss Teresa on a number of occasions, he could have said, yeah, it's for me, the appointment is for myself, on behalf of my sister. But he said kind of his sister's name, which was the appointment, which again does suggest some form of foul play. Teresa's phone and camera were found in a barrel behind the Avery residence, burnt out, or the remnants of the phone and camera, again suggesting that there was some attempt made to conceal that evidence on his property. Again, whether it was planted there or not is a different story, but the fact is it was found there. Her bones were found in his burn pit. Now, this is probably by far the most damning piece of evidence for the defense, suggesting Stephen Avery is guilty. Again, there was further kind of analysis afterwards to suggest the bones had been moved, which suggests they have been potentially planted there, but the fact is, in the case, the bones were found in his burn pit. His DNA was found in her car. Again, this suggests that he had been in her car. Now, if it was a normal meeting for taking pictures, there would be no reason for his DNA to be in his car. in her car, least of all blood. So there was blood, I think, found in 4 places, which was suggested by the defence to be planted. But there was also sweat underneath the hood or the bonnet, if you're in the UK. Hood, if you're in the US. So there was sweat kind of found there. Now, that one can question that would the police force actually have access to the DNA from his sweat, or was it that he actually did go under the hood? So that's definitely something that both, I think, prosecutors and the defence can question, and we as the general public need more information on as to that suggests he's guilty or not. But his sweat was found under the hood. The defence then actually said, well, his fingerprints weren't, which suggests it's been planted. But again, the fact that his sweat and DNA was in and around the vehicle suggests some form of guilt. Now, the documentary was slightly biased, and in the sense it helped Avery's case. It was called The Making of a Murderer. So obviously the information that they have shown would want you to think what the documentary directors believe also, which to some degree suggests innocence. Now definitely there was foul play, I'm not questioning that, but you're viewing the entire case through the perspective of the filmmakers, and there was a lot of criticism afterwards suggesting that they haven't included all of the information. So again, we can question the credibility of the source of the information. In terms of the character of Stephen Avery, he has been in trouble with the law before. His entire family have, who he obviously socializes with while growing up, which suggests he does have some form of inclination towards criminal activities. The worst of all is cat cruelty, that he set the family cat on fire. He may have been young and dumb and stupid, and he served his time for that, but what kind of a human being sets a cat on fire, douses them in kerosene or petrol or flammable substance, and then sets them on fire and watches them burn to death? That suggests that is some form of sadistic pleasure there, which doesn't make any sense. Maybe he's learned his lesson, he's moved on from there. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Don't shoot the messenger, I'm just saying this is the information that was provided. He also, I believe, robbed a tavern or a pub for $14 and 2 packs of Pabst Blue Ribbon. Again, when in his younger days, which suggests that he again doesn't have a problem with crossing the line between legal and illegal. There's also the case of him running someone off the road, and the case of violence and threatening behaviour, which again suggests kind of the character of Stephen Avery. So all of this information suggests to some degree that there is guilt there. This is definitely all the factors that the prosecution was ploughing forward. Now, we're going to look at the information that suggests he's actually not guilty, and the fact that this is unlikely and he's been framed. You can't help but feel sorry for him, especially in a picture like this where he's in court. He seems fairly helpless against the powers of the Manitowoc Sheriff's County. So first of all, they have a vested interest to frame him. They have had previous problems with him, and they do definitely have a reason to try and get rid of him. Most recently, before the case took place, there was a loss of jobs, bad publicity provided on to the Manitowoc State County Sheriff's Department, and Stephen Avery was held as some form of a folk hero in the local area. The Manitowoc State County was definitely against this and were not happy with his status following his 18 years of being wrongly accused and arrested and imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit. So he then went to, I believe 2 years after release, he was released in 2002 or 2003, and he went to sue the Manitowoc State County in 2004. Now, there was a number of legal proceedings that took place, and a lot of high-ranking police officers that were in the firing line. The payout that would have been awarded to Stephen Avery, I believe, was $36 million, $2 million for every single year he was put behind bars incorrectly. Now, the police force have an insurance for this, but the insurance company that the Manitowoc State Sheriff's Department have deemed that there was some form of foul play, and the insurance would not cover this. This would mean that the actual Manitowoc State County Sheriff's Department would become bankrupt because they would not be able to, in theory, pay for this. So this suggests there's a large stimulus for Stephen Avery to be framed. He was also the only person to be investigated in the entire murder case. Now, one may suggest on the prosecution side that, well, with such overwhelming evidence, why would there be a reason to interview or kind of pursue anyone else? But the information or the evidence was found over a long period of time, and definitely they will be treading on eggshells around Stephen Avery because of the previous problem with him. So they should, in theory, have investigated other people. Who else might have had a vested interest in murdering her? Her ex-boyfriend, for example. Was there any foul play there? I'm not saying he did it, but in previous cases, domestic violence leading to death or whatever else, he definitely did help a lot with the search and rescue. And being her ex-boyfriend, I presume they would have maybe ended on good terms. But definitely that would be a person of interest if I was a police officer, to look into further detail. There was the finding of Teresa's key, the RAV4, that was on the 6th search. Now, I'm not a police officer, I don't do searches, but if you're searching, looking for evidence, presumably something like a key would jump out at you the first time. You would look around properly, you would shake the bedside cabinet, supposedly, which is what it fell out of. I can't believe it was found on the 6th search. And who was it found by? The Manitowoc State Sheriff's Department, who were not supposed to be there unsupervised yet. There was someone supervising them, but they weren't actually being babysat. They were in the same building. So that's definitely suggests some form of foul play. I mean, the 6th search, I can't believe that. I can't believe they didn't find it on the 1st or 2nd. So there's some foul play there. The finding of the bullet was made months after the initial search, also in the garage. It was fired from his rifle, which suggests again he is guilty. The rifle was always above his bed, but definitely the police force have access to that, and they could have quite easily have taken that out and fired it and got the imprint on the bullet and so on. So that was found months after the initial search. Now, this is something that the police will be looking for almost immediately. So why did it take months to find? This doesn't make any sense to me. According to Brendan Dassey, there was quite a vivid, disgusting kind of course of events that took place in terms of Teresa being held down and her throat being slit and being raped repeatedly, and yet there was absolutely no DNA, no blood DNA of Teresa inside Avery's trailer. Now that suggests that there's a flaw in the story of Brendan Dassey, which, I may add, was kind of taken by force or under illegal conditions. He did not have a lawyer present. He was forced to kind of, a confession was almost fed to him. There was no blood DNA, so that suggests his story is flawed and maybe affects his credibility as a witness. But obviously the prosecution didn't see this and went with what he was saying. So there's no blood DNA whatsoever inside Avery's trailer. Yes, he did have shackles and whatever else in his building, but what he does is in his own time in his bedroom with his girlfriend or wife, that's his business. It wasn't used. There would be evidence of her DNA on that as well, so it wasn't found on that. The only DNA on the key that was found, on the RAV4 key that was found months afterwards on the 6th search, was Stephen's. Now, the defense solicitors, it wasn't in the program. I don't know if they did bring it up, but it wasn't brought up in the program. That if you use a key for a number of years, it's going to have your own DNA on it underneath because of your constant access to it. Now, it seemed as though the complete key was scrubbed and it would just had Stephen's DNA on it, not Teresa's. So that suggests it is washed in again some form of foul play. The confession that was used on the basis of the prosecution for Brendan Dassey and Um, and of course, Stephen Avery was almost forced out of Brendan. He was duped into he was pulled out of his class without a lawyer present and interviewed under high pressure situation on video, where he does have learning difficulties, and there was an argument to suggest that he was almost doing what he just thought the investigators wanted to hear. I mean, him suggesting that would this be finished by a specific time because he has a project to hand in on 6th period, just shows that he doesn't understand the weight of what was being said. The fact that he thought he could actually leave from there after confessing to a murder. This definitely suggests some form of learning or understanding difficulty, which I believe the prosecution used fully to their advantage, which I think was unfair on him, by a very, very understatement. That was very, very unfair on him. Stephen Avery, by his previous lawyer, has said that he has a low IQ of, I believe, 72. That is a fairly low IQ. But if he did commit the murder, he did commit the crime, he has access to a crusher. Why would he not get rid of the evidence? This is what I do not understand. Why would he not get rid of the evidence? Why would he leave it on his property? He has all of the means to crush and dispose of this, but he didn't. I don't know if this was used as a defense. It wasn't shown in the program. Maybe it would implicate him suggesting he thinks like a murderer, but if he really did, then he would have done it. I don't understand. Would he leave it for the general public to find in the searches, in terms of the vehicle on his property? I can't really believe that. Overall, there was such a high media coverage of this trial, of this story, before it even went to trial, that the jury's mind was almost made up before there was a trial. So I don't think there was a fair trial for him. The jury had access to large media coverage, which almost 100% implicated him of the crime. So they went into the courtroom with a large bias, a very large bias, suggesting that he did do it. In a case like this, where media has such large access to it, I don't believe there would be a fair trial for anyone in this circumstance, but that doesn't mean that it's right to then prove or kind of suggest he is guilty. Also, the EDTA test that was undertaken on the DNA that was found in the vehicle was not allowed, was no longer performed, and then suddenly, within 1 week, it was performed. Also, another question could be, why did the defense not have access to this? And why were they not able to do their own EDTA testing? I presume because the FBI and the government did not want such a large case of corruption to be public knowledge. There would be a loss of confidence in the state and the police force and so on. So this suggests probably why it wasn't given to the defense, but we can definitely question the reliability and the validity of this test. It definitely protects all law enforcement and what the US stand for, but there was kind of some suggestion of foul play in this. So that definitely suggests foul play. So now we've looked at the information on both sides. Overall, let's have a look. So, overall, we've looked at both sides of the argument now. The good thing is that a big hotshot new lawyer has decided to take up Stephen Avery's case. Her name's Catherine Zellner. So hopefully, she's got a good track record of freeing those who have been wrongfully imprisoned. Hopefully, she will do wonders for Stephen Avery and look at it in a lot more detail than probably me and you can. So that's definitely something that we can look forward to in defense of Stephen Avery, or against if you're part of the prosecution and you're corrupt. It's just my opinion. Now, her name is Kathleen Zellner, and she's got, I think, about 17 people of wrongful convictions in the past. So that definitely suggests she's good. She's got a good track history. Now, that's one factor. Another factor is, regardless of if he did or did not commit this case, kind of is guilty for this murder, he was still sentenced wrongly for 18 years. 18 years he spent behind prison. Basically the prime of his life, his 20s and his 30s, like when he was growing up. He lost 18 years of his life, and regardless of if he did this murder or not, he still deserves reimbursement. Even if he is guilty, he'll never get out and be able to access it. His children should be able to have access to that. His family should have access to that, because that is incorrect. That's a huge failure by the state, and they can't just put him in prison and then stop paying him, or not pay him at all. Now, something I learned from watching Matilda years ago in the 90s, Danny DeVito said, appearance is 9/10 of the law. Looks will impact the way that the law deal with you, the job that you have, the impact you have on society. Are you someone who clamps vehicles, or are you a doctor? Are you a lawyer? So these kind of things that the government and the state will look at. They look at your previous convictions. Now, obviously, Stephen Avery was no angel. This proved to work against him in the investigation of this case, and that just goes to show that if someone has a stereotype or preconceived idea about someone, they may go ahead and prosecute on that basis. If you're a police officer, a robbery just happened, you see someone with sagged pants and a very low hat on and a hoodie on compared to someone walking in a suit across the road, who are you going to stop? Let's think about it logically, yeah? So appearance is 9/10 of the law, and unfortunately for Stephen Avery, he's had a history where he hasn't had the best luck with the law, or made the best decisions. Regardless of if he's a good or bad person, he should still be treated equally. There should still be a fair trial. He shouldn't have access. He shouldn't be proven to be guilty because of that. Now, Brendan Dassey is a different story. We haven't looked at him much in this video, but he definitely should not be kind of duped into that. In the UK, that would not be allowed for him to be interviewed under those conditions. I'm not saying the UK is better than the US. I'm not saying vice versa, but I'm just saying there needs to be some form of responsible adult there that's a lawyer. If he is under a specific age and especially has learning difficulties, he shouldn't be forced a confession and now he's serving life on that basis. That's wrong. That is really wrong. Everything that I've said today is my opinion. It's looking at the information provided by all of the sources that are given. We must look at all the credibility of all of the sources. As I said before, the making of a murderer had the intention to prove his innocence and prove the wrongdoing of the state. The media at the time probably had the objective to prove his guilt. They're all going on the information that's given to them. The truth is definitely out there. We just need further investigation. We need to have credible sources. So I hope this has helped you. I think with the information that has been given to me, overall, all of the investigations that I have done with the information that's available out there, whether it's biased or tainted or not, I think Stephen Avery is innocent of this, and I think he was innocent of his previous conviction as well, which is why it was overturned. So I think he's innocent of this. I think there's definitely someone out there that's been responsible for this crime, and just like before, he was wrongfully convicted. The rapist that was responsible for the previous crime that Stephen Avery was convicted for went on and did 2 to 3 other rapes, I think, and then was eventually prosecuted. So I think if there is another killer out there, the police shouldn't close this case and say, right, that's the end of it. They should continue looking, because it's not down to a personal vendetta. It's about justice. So on the basis that's given to me, I think that Stephen Avery is innocent. I want you to leave your comments and your emails and messages to me, and I'll see how you think. If there's any further videos to make, I'll respond to any of you. That's no problem. Hopefully this has helped to clear up the information and condensed about 10 hours into about 25 minutes. Okay, peace out.